Today, I'm going to do an exploration and review of Coronel and the Falkland Islands. This is part of the Dreadnoughts and Battlewagons System, or series, which is a folio game series from Decision Games. And I think there's two in this series so far. This is a World War I, or has two World War I scenarios, and I think there's another one that has World War II scenarios in it. This is a relatively simple naval war rule set, and let's take a look at what we have here. I've done a unbagging of that, and I'll put that in the description below. But this is kind of a review of the game and also a review of some of the gameplay. I did the Falkland Islands scenario without the optional rules, and this was kind of the ending of the game, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But let's talk a little bit about the game itself. I mean, this is your standard folio game. It comes in these, folders here that you can store everything back in there. You have a map. It's a naval game, so don't expect much with the map other than, it's blue. It has a white dot in the center of the hex and has numbers on the hexes, so for placement and setting up the scenario. You'll get the scenario specific rules, which this talks about the two different scenarios, the Coronel and the Falkland Islands. It talks about the setup and any special rules and victory conditions, and then you have the game track right here. The rules themselves are relatively easy. There are 8 pages, and the last page is the primary charts you're going to need for gun firing modifications and critical hits. And so it's dual column, and as I said, it's relatively easy to get into the game. The counters are typical Decision Games Folio counters. They have a little bit of the nibs. They're not especially thick. They punch out okay, and you've got all your information right there on the counter. There's not a lot of ships in these two scenarios, and so most of the counters are markers like hits or torpedoes launched, or slowed, or Hulk, or dead in the water, just different types of markers that you're going to be putting on the ships. So that's what you get in the game. Let's talk a little bit about gameplay. And in gameplay, you basically, there's 3 segments. There's combat, movement, and then administrative. And that's like dealing with, fires and smoke and stuff that happens on board the ship. Combat is relatively, straightforward. I'll use this right here. If we can see that pretty good there. So if you look there at the ship, you're going to have a gun rating. That's how many dice you throw. And that dice is going to be modified by the range and other things that could pop up on the, as far as your different modifiers here. You have range, speed, and other types of modifiers, like if it's in the broadside or in the bow or stern or what have you, as far as the firing arc. And then you're going to roll that many dice, and then hits are going to occur on a 5 or 6. And then if you get a hit on the 5 or 6, you're going to compare the weight of fire. So that's kind of the overall effectiveness of the ship's guns to the structural integrity of the target. And then based on that difference, if it's -2 or higher or lower, I should say, then there's really not going to be any effect. But if it's -1 or up to even being positive, then you're going to roll the die again for each one of the hits. And then depending upon what happens there, you're either going to start doing structural hits, or you're going to start, or you get a chance, if you roll a 6, you'll get a chance to roll on critical hits. And then critical hits, stuff like steering jammed, you can't maneuver for so many turns, onboard equipment damage, waterline hit, that means you're slowed, onboard fire, which affects you can't fire, and you've got to put that fire out, and that's going to create a smoke hex, which could block a line of sight. Dead in the water, just means just what it says, or catastrophic damage means it's pretty much sunk. It becomes a hulk, and it's just sitting there, and it's pretty much out of the game. Dead in the water, you can still fire, but you just can't move. I mean, you're just a gun platform at that point. And then you have the movement phase, and the movement phase, depending on what you're damaged at, you get to move, and there's 3 different types of movement. You have standard, which you can move, 1 to 2. Most of these ships are at 3. You can have flank speed, which you move at the maximum, which is 3, or you can have cruise speed, which you move 1. So there's different types of movement, and those again can affect firing and the like. So that's it. I mean, there's a few other rules, but I mean, in 8 pages, actually 7 pages, and it's not very dense. There's not a lot there. There's your firing arcs. And again, that will modify, that helps who you can target or determines who you target, but also will affect some modifiers. There's torpedo ratings. In I think the normal torpedo ratings or range is 6, but in World War I, they're like 4, or at least in I think this scenario, they were 4. So that makes a difference on your torpedo ratings. And most of these ships here had torpedoes. Anything else? Maneuver effects like trying to do evasive, and which would affect, I think, torpedoes as well. Then you have like your maximum range there, and that maximum range is going to tell you, depending upon, half that is your, effective, and then close is like a fourth of that. And again, there's different modifiers as well on that. The range on this map is hex is 1 mile, so long. So that's why, I mean, these World War I ships, I think the most was like I think like 12 or 14 or something like that. But like you have here, the Graphs B, these are the maximum range is 21. So when you get into the World War II vessels, you're going to get probably, which is a different folio, you're going to get a larger range on here. Then you see that structural hit. If you knock out, you mark hits on the ship, and then if you, once you take out all the structural hit, you'll flip that counter over. If it doesn't have a back side to it, then that ship is basically a hulk. It's done. If there is a backside, then you flip it over. Then once you knock out the rest of the structural hits that are on the backside of it, as you can see, there's the backside has 1 structural, then it becomes a hulk. And so that's the game. Talk about gameplay, or at least a recap of this scenario. This scenario, the Germans are down here and at the very bottom of the board, and they need to swing up and exit off the north. I think they put it down the bottom so you have a little bit more room to maneuver, but it becomes very tight. The Germans really have to turn pretty quick and get up. The British are kind of in the middle right here, but relatively close. So there is some combat that could happen at the very beginning. And, that's what happened here. You got a German dead in the water, but then the Germans were pretty successful and had 2 hulks on the British here, and then got another hulk on the British here, and then this is a German vessel that became a hulk, and then another German vessel became a hulk. So the way you win the scenario is the Germans have to exit 3 ships off the northern part of the board, or the British have to, they can win if they destroy all the German ships, either dead in the water, hulk, or sunk. This is a situation where the Germans only got 2 off the top of the board there, so that wouldn't be a victory. However, they can also win if they were to have if at least 1 British battlecruiser is a hulk or sunk. Well, there's 3 of the British ships that became hulks. So technically the Germans won. Technically the Germans won at the beginning of the game here, or early in the game here. And then the rest of it was kind of academic. But it became kind of an interesting chase as the game went on. It's relatively simple game. I mean, it's not pure barren pretzels, because there is some decision and there is some simulation of the different types of ships and their capabilities, but it can be kind of swingy. I've rolled a lot of sixes, and if you roll sixes on 5 or 6s to get a hit, and then if you roll a 6 to go to the critical table, and then roll a 6 on the critical table, I mean that's hard to do. But if you do that a couple of times, you're going to get some hulks pretty quick here. You get some pretty quick critical hits. It's a little swingy. This is if you want to just get a feel for World War I naval combat, or maybe this scenario, maybe one of these two scenarios. You've read up on these two battles and want to kind of get a feel for it. This is a fine game, but it's relatively basic. The rules are relatively simple, and it doesn't play very long. So in that regard, it's a fine, throw it on the table and see how it turns out. If you're wanting something deeper, then you need to go somewhere else. This is not a deep sim, and as I said, it can be a little swingy with the dice if you get on a roll, so to speak, get on a good roll, so to speak. So I like it. It's fine. I mean, I don't know how much I would play this. This is one that if I just had the itch, or I was reading about one of these two battles, or just had the itch for World War I naval combat, then I'll probably pull this out and play it. But it's not something that is gonna, it doesn't take too much time, and so you get it done and then move on to something else. So in that respect, it's probably more of an appetizer than a meal. There's just not enough there, but a fine. Almost a filler. It's a little bit more than a filler, but it's almost a war game filler. Filler is kind of a Euro hobby game term, but it feels like that. It feels like it'd be a nice, quick, if you're going to have a war game weekend and want to do some naval combat, you might want to start off and knock this out just to get warmed up and then get to the main course. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the Dreadnoughts and Battlewagons system. I might look into the World War I version of it, see what that is. I think it's like the River Plate, or I can't remember what system that is, but I'm pretty sure it's World War II. Sorry, World War II. It covers World War II. This one covers World War I. Coronel and Falkland Islands. That's what I have for you today. I'd love to know your thoughts on this system. If you've played either one of these titles in this system, if there's another one in this system, please let me know that as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Love to hear what you think about it. Anyway, or any of the folio games on Decision Games. This is one of the larger folio games, not one of the mini games that come in a little bit fuller, more of a smaller package, bagged package. Anyway, that's what I have for today. Thanks for spending some time with me. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching.